This episode is powered by Mod 42. Their modular approach represents the future of data center infrastructure. By combining innovation, design with cutting-edge technology, they deliver scalable, efficient, and sustainable solutions that transforms how businesses deploy and manage their computing resources. Welcome to Beyond the Megawatt. I'm Valerie Crafton, Risk and Site Strategist. I'm joined by my co-host, Mara Irvin, reuse expert and real estate visionary. Together, we are the Data Center Darlings. We're spotlighting the voices and ideas powering digital infrastructure's future. Let's dive in and go beyond the megawatt. Welcome everyone to Beyond the Megawatt. I have two amazing guests today. It's a really special reason we brought these two together, and it's because we really are seeing a few more women on panels and out there speaking when we go to conferences more than we normally do, but we're still hearing it's still not diverse enough. And mostly when I ask the folks at the conferences why we're not seeing more women on the panel, it's less about the intentional of them trying to make diverse voices on those panels and more about the fact that women aren't stepping up. They're not volunteering, or they're backing down at the last minute. I don't know if that's nerves. I don't know if it's just I'm not confident in my presence on the stage, but we're going to talk about all of that today. One, from someone who's really confident about stepping on the stage in her era today, and from Dr. Sharon, who is a coach in driving your story to help you take it to the next level. And I'll let her tell you a little bit more about that. So Dr. Sharon, why don't you kick it off and share a little bit about you, how you ended up in the industry and started your business to coaching, public speaking.
Great. Thanks so much, Valerie, and thanks for having me. I actually started my journey about 25 years ago. I suffered greatly from imposter syndrome. So a lot of self-doubt, and I'd get very nervous before going on stage or before making a major presentation, to the point that before my doctorate dissertation, I received my doctorate in leadership development from Columbia University. And before that, I had a full-out panic attack. So I really knew I had to master feeling more comfortable on stage. I had to master presentation skills. So it really came from a passion and an experience of what it was like for me before I knew these tools getting on stage. So I invented years ago this formula for presentation success, and I started to teach it and now run a company called Inside Out Learning for the past 20 plus years. And it's not just me. I have several coaches and consultants who work through the company who are trained on the authenticity code. And that's my book. It's also a training program where people can really connect with their authentic selves and then present from that place and feel comfort on stage and move through the fear or the panic of being on stage. So I really have invented and used the techniques daily, and also coach and teach leaders around the world how to really trust themselves, be confident on stage, and focus on their audience and enjoy public speaking.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. And I love that that was really driven from a place of, hey, I'm going to face this fear, right? This is part of my career and I don't really have a choice. I have to do something about it. And you did. And not only that, but you created a path to help others who are experiencing that same thing. We will, for those listening, we will put in the notes a link to Dr. Sharon's book and her bio and a way to reach out to her if you're interested in coaching. But let's transition over to Chrissy. Chrissy, you're in the industry with me, and I have sat in the audience and listened to you speak and lead panels many, many times, and you do it with such ease and comfort. One, I want to hear your story of a little bit of how you got into the industry, and has it always been that easy for you?
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I love this topic, by the way, and it's so important for no matter what industry you're in, for women to be comfortable to get up in front of a room and speak. I think it puts you in a different light to the audience for sure. So I have been in the telecommunications technology industry for over 25 years. Started at a contractor, and then I said I had a hormonal surge and started my own consulting company where we did technology design. My youngest daughter was 4 months old when I decided to do that. So I don't think I was in the right frame of mind, but it really put me on a path in this industry. And I was quite young. I was just 30, I think. And I had to really figure out, as a company owner and leading a team of all men too, when I started taking myself seriously, people started taking me seriously. I was the principal of the company, and it would make a big difference if I just called and said, hey, it's Chrissy Olsen. We would love to work with you, Mr. Architect or whatever. Or I got his assistant, because they had those back then. And LinkedIn wasn't as big back then, right? So, and I just would say, hey, I'm the principal of XYZ company, and I want to have a meeting with you, or I want to talk to you about our services. It changed a lot of things. But I joined industry organizations that helped me get audiences. I still think that's hugely important. And I've had a lot of different roles. I've been focused on data centers for the last 15 years, been speaking on stage for 10, and have done it quite a bit in the last 3 or 4 years, right? Worked for companies where we needed that brand recognition and that thought leadership. And it's really helped me expand my professional network, which, if somebody said, what are you most proud of in your career? It's building a really great professional network, right? It makes a huge difference. And when you speak on a panel, or you're part of this, any kind of, even if you're by yourself, you have to engage with either the people running it or the people on the panel. It makes really close relationships. You become an expert, or at least thought leadership in the subject you're talking about, and you're learning something as well, right? So, and every time you get on stage, you get a little bit more confident. I'm always a little bit of situational anxiety right before, but I get in the zone. Like, I go and sit by myself. I make sure I have all my notes. I make sure that if I'm leading a panel, the guys know that I'm in charge, like, and I will call on you. Right? If I want you to speak, only because they're so excited about whatever they're talking about. They like to talk over one another. And we have to want to make sure that if there's somebody flown out there for a speaking event, that they get a chance to be heard. I just get more comfortable once I get up there and start talking to the audience. I think it's really important to engage your audience up front. So you set the comfort level, like, we want you to engage. We want you to ask questions. We want you to stand up and do that, right? So we can hear you. And I like to find out who's in the audience too. So are they a contractor, a designer, or whatever? And then you kind of know who you're speaking with too. And it also, like, if you want to see or talk to somebody in the audience that you haven't met before, it kind of identifies that as well. So that was probably a way long introduction, but
no, it was great. It was great. No, I love that story. And I asked you 2 questions and you answered both questions. So it was going to be a long answer. Dr. Sharon, you listened to Christina a little bit, and Christina's talking about panels, right? Now, there's sometimes you're doing a panel, sometimes you're doing a presentation. How does that prep look differently between the two?
Well, for a presentation, you're often working on PowerPoint slides, and you have to take a presentation to captivate your audience, get their attention, and then walk through material, and then finish strong and handle a Q&A yourself. So that's a presentation. Now, for a panel, you need to prepare to tell powerful stories and to answer questions that you're typically shared beforehand. So how do you answer those questions, tell your story in the best way possible, but you're not preparing usually PowerPoint slides or any kind of material. You are more having a conversation and telling stories, answering questions.
Now, do you ever see a PowerPoint slide presentation and a panel? Is that unusual?
It tends to be unusual, but it's possible. And I do see it periodically where someone might use a slide. Like, if you have 5 minutes to answer a question, you may have a slide behind you to help you answer the question. But it's not a full out longer presentation. It might be a slide or two that supports you. And many people will take a little 3x5 card up just with some notes on it to help them remember what they want to say in answers to questions versus more material like slides.
Okay.
I think a presentation with slides is more difficult than just
It is.
being on a panel, because you have to follow the slides, or sometimes it depends on the setup of the presentation too. I love it when my slide is on the floor in front of me.
Yes.
And I don't have to look back or point to something, or I'll have it on a laptop in front of me. But I think it's a little more challenging to do a presentation like that, because you have to advance your slides. There's just a lot more things to touch and see and
think about 100%, like advancing the slides. Did I flip the slide or did I just keep talking? I definitely have done that. I'm like, oh no, I've talked past 2 slides, but I wasn't looking back, and I'm like, well, we've already gone through these 2. But so how does one prepare a story? What does that mean? You're preparing a story when you're going into your presentations.
Well, a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be careful not to get lost in the story, telling maybe too long of a story. And it's very important to prepare for a panel before you do a panel, I believe. So you want to know from the moderator, how many minutes do I have? What's typical? If there's 4 people on a panel or 3 people on a panel, you try to have equal time. And so you really want to think through, okay, in the answer to this question, I'm going to tell a story about my life or about my leadership or about my industry. And I want to write how am I going to start? How am I going to weave it through? And how am I going to finish that within my time allotted? Because what I see happen a lot is people will tell too long of a story. Then one panel member gets way more time than another panel member, and the other panel members get frustrated with that other panel member. So it's really taking that time to think through, what is my most meaningful item that I want to share in this story, and the key takeaway I want the audience to have. So I often ask my clients those questions, and then we weave that beginning, middle, and end around the story.
So Chrissy, how do you prepare? You've done a lot of panels. How would you say that that's kind of the process you go through, or maybe walk us through how you prepare a panel? Because yours have always, I mean, from my observation, been very successful and go really well. So how did you do your preparation?
you. So I've done it. I've had to do it at the last minute for some people, which makes it really interesting. Usually our presentations are not very long, an hour goes by just like that, just amazingly. But I always do prep calls depending on what the conference is or what the situation is, and also who's participating. Like sometimes just getting everybody on a prep call can be pretty challenging in itself. But I think it's really important so that we understand, like, especially if there's new people, we want to understand who they are, what work they're doing, what position they hold. And that usually will spark conversation in itself if it's not people you already know. And then I usually will prepare a list of questions or topics that are just preliminary, just to get that conversation going. And then usually we'll say, no, we don't want to talk about that, or we want to pivot this, and what order we want to do it in. Depending on how big the panel is, we might take turns answering certain questions, and we prepare that up front. Like, I'll take this one, you take this one. I'm proficient in this area. So it varies every different panel. And then sometimes I've gotten pulled in, like our moderator didn't show up, or this guy didn't show up, and we need you to step in because there's only one person on the panel, or we don't have anybody to lead it. And I think you have to understand that you have to control the conversation and make sure everybody has a chance to talk, and all the important subject criteria is covered, but also understand who the audience is going to be. So usually I like to try to understand who's attending ahead of time and work with the conference or the organization to say who's our audience, so I can prepare the panelists for that as well.
How important is that, Dr. Sharon, to really understand who the audience is?
It is huge. It's, I think, one of the most important things in having a successful presentation or panel story is that I always say start with know your audience. So we have a couple tools in my book that actually helps people to think through their audience, such as the audience understanding matrix, where it's what's most important to them, what hooks them, what type of details do they need, what are they willing to compromise. You really think through your audience and answer those types of questions. You should also think through what kind of style they might be, because if you're a people person, but you're in front of more technical people that might be more planner types or point people, you're going to need to flex a little bit in how you might tell a story or in how you present so that you don't lose your audience. So that is the first step in my formula for presentation success is know your audience.
Oh, there you go. Well, see, you're on the right track so far, Chrissy. When we think about telling a story and knowing our audience, I would imagine that we start with maybe the key takeaways. What are the key takeaways, and then build on that? Am I correct? Or where does someone start?
Yes, you can often start with what do you want to leave your audience with? What would success look like? And in fact, I love having people think through a basic summary of what is your purpose to be on stage? Why would the audience care about that? Okay, so your value proposition. And then what do you want the audience to achieve at the end? So those three questions is how I often start in any prep after we analyze the audience. So after we analyze the audience, then I'll go to what's your purpose, what's your value proposition, what's your outcome? And that's really important and I know Chrissy probably already does that for if she's moderating a panel, to know overall what is the purpose of that panel? Why are people interested in the topic? And how do you want to end that panel and leave the audience?
I think that's amazing. So I love that. Not only just your purpose, but your value proposition. So what, right? Like, what's your so what? What are you talking away? And then what is the outcome of the so what? And then just tying that all together. That's really beautiful. And so you've done all the prep. We've got all the people. We know who they are. We've wrangled them into a meeting. We've coordinated them. We know what our purpose is, our value prop. We understand what the outcome is. We understand what the takeaways are. We get the story. And then we get on the panel and we still get someone that you can't really control humans. They become long-winded. What are the tips to rein them in without embarrassing them? How can we prepare them in advance? Hey, I may do what, how can you kind of rein them in to kind of keep them going down this rabbit hole with all the prep in before? What's the signal or something you can say in advance to let them know, wrap it up without putting them on the spot? What are some of the things we could do? Or maybe
I can tell you what I have done. And then Dr. Sharon, I would love advice on that. So sometimes, and Val, you know this, when we're at these events, we're not supposed to be selling whatever we sell, right? Promoting. It's supposed to be pretty impartial. It's about subject matter. But you always get somebody who's up there and goes off. But I think I just did one last week where the audience was super engaged. There were a lot of questions, and it's really just whoever's most confident in answering that question or likes the microphone will grab it first. And so as a moderator, you have to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. And so I let my panelists know, like, I will ask the question and then I will call on you to answer. And each time I'm going to start with somebody different, right? And that way everybody gets kind of a little piece. And like last week, I had to say, okay, Mr. So-and-so, you haven't spoken yet. We're going to start with you, right? So, and just make a little light of it. And it wasn't just because he just wasn't, it's just somebody grabbed the microphone first to answer the question. But so you just kind of have to control, and you have to watch the speed, right? And how much somebody's answering, or if they pre-answer a question. That's the one I always love, where I'm like crossing my question out because they jumped ahead, and then you just have to pivot. And then I'll say, we're completely pivoting now, or I'll make a joke and just say, well, you just stole my thunder for the next question, so let's move on to this. And usually nobody even cares about that. So I think you just got to kind of keep it light. And you have to just let them know, like, hey, you cannot sell your wares when you're at this. And sometimes you can, right? And sometimes you want to make sure you're not just having a speaker to speak, or you're just not speaking to speak. Because I've been pulled onto panels and said, oh, here's the panel. I'm like, I don't know anything about that. Like, I don't just want to be up there unless I could speak intelligently and I'm going to bring something to the audience, right? So then I'll say, put me on something different. Or I think that's very important too, because your comfort level is going to be on if you know what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
I think that's a really important point, is the fact that don't just speak to speak. I know you want to be on a panel, but the audience wants to hear from folks who, they may not be experts, but they have enough experience to speak about it confidently. And if you just get up there just to speak generically, there's no takeaway, right? There's no value prop and there's no purpose. Back to those three main points that Dr. Sharon brought up. So sorry, Dr. Sharon, as it relates to like reining your audience or reining your panel in, do you have any special tips?
Well, I think what Chrissy's doing is right on. I feel that it's very important in advance to really set the ground rules for how the panel's going to go and how you're going to interrupt if you need to. So let them know ahead of time, and then you just have to follow through with that. And many times I'll say something like, we have time for one more question, or we have 1 minute left for this response, and then we need to move on. So little things like that you have a couple in your back pocket of how can you intervene to facilitate, but in a respectful way without saying you're taking too much time.
Right.
Yeah.
Or is there like a trigger word? Should we say a safe word? Like, hey, I'm going to say pineapple. That means wrap it up, buddy.
Yeah. Your safe word.
Safe word, or you could even have a symbol that you do. You could work that out. If I scratch my nose, this is what it means. So I've done different things, but I really think it's up to the moderator, has to be a good facilitator. And as Chrissy was saying, help that equal time occur and make sure to set those ground rules in advance so no one's surprised. But you're going to have some extroverts on a panel that love to talk, and then you're going to have some introverts that have thought through things and they want that space to talk. So that's why a moderator has to facilitate so that all voices are heard, not just the extroverts.
Which is why I had Chrissy come on as an example of what good looks like.
You've seen me do it.
I've seen you in action, and not only that, but I've also seen you just naturally bring humor into the conversation in awkward situations like that. And you know what? Everybody appreciates it. It just makes light of the situation. It doesn't make anybody uncomfortable or embarrassed. And it's enjoyable to listen to. So I want to go back to the story though, because I think that so often we miss that piece, is really bringing a story to what you're saying, because that's something we can relate to, whether it's a personal story, a personal experience. Talk to us a little bit more, Dr. Sharon, the power of the story.
Yeah, the power of the story is that you have experience that no one else has. And it is powerful to share that story. Your audience will relate to a story more than just a heady response, because they're going to see themselves in the story. So everyone's going to be like, oh, I experienced something like that, or I relate to that person. It really helps with a connection to your audience when you're able to tell more from a personal experience. This is what's happened to me, how I handled it, and now how I've really put that in action in my life moving forward. It's very motivational. You engage and you connect with your audience, versus if you're just up there sharing tips or tools, you will not connect as much.
This episode is brought to you by BCS Switchgear, where power meets precision. From obsolete breakers to the new 15 to 34.5 kV switchgear and low break switches, BCS delivers fast answers and custom engineered solutions that keep mission critical systems online. So I'm listening to a book right now called Let Them by Mel Gibson. I think it's Mel Gibson, right?
Reading
This
this.
is a beautiful story. But talking about herself and telling her story and how vulnerable she is with sharing her story to help you really relate to the message she's trying to get across. So how important is the vulnerability, and how do you get to that comfort level of vulnerability? Maybe I'll start with Chrissy. Chrissy, have you ever had to, like, have you grown into your vulnerability phase?
Yeah.
And is that easy for you now, or has it always been easy?
No, because I think when you're younger, you're not as confident. It's just maturity, right? Maturity in business, maturity in life, lots of life lessons. It all adds up to, as we get older, you become more comfortable in your skin, and you know what you know, and you know what you're good at, right? And I think we're fine saying, that's not my area of expertise, so I'm going to pass it on to this person because I'm going to bore you, or you just make light of it. But I think my approach is talk about what you can be passionate about, or that you're excited about, because that just exudes out of you, right? And it makes you more dynamic to the audience. I think that being vulnerable and showing some vulnerability makes you approachable and opens you up. I've gotten on a stage with heels, and like I'm standing behind a podium, either without heels, and you can only see me. And I mean, it's pretty funny. You got to like, okay, I'm going to stand over here so you can see more than my eyebrows, right? Or my heels are caught in a crack within the stage. I've been on a stage where they put these bar stools, and I'm a little vertically challenged. And I remember having a skirt on, and luckily I had heels so I could hook them into the bar on the bar stool. But like, I couldn't get out of the chair. I was like, my inner thighs were seized up from squeezing together, but because I couldn't cross my legs without showing. So you got to think about all those things. Ladies wear pants.
Exactly.
I was seized up because the bar stool was so, the space between the seat and the thing was, so you got to think about that. So I will even have people say, bring lower chairs so you can get comfortable, because if you're thinking about crossing your legs so hard or staying on your chair, that makes a big difference. But I've said that, like, because I said, sorry, we started a little late. We needed lower chairs because we're vertically challenged. Whatever. It just puts the audience at ease. It makes you approachable. And I think for me, if somebody wants to talk to you at the end of your speaking event, and usually we're on a time thing and we have to get off and move on, get on to the next speaker, I always encourage them, I will be outside afterwards if you want to ask me any questions. And I will tell you, that is where I'm like, that was a successful speaking event, because I had a line of people who wanted to introduce themselves or they wanted to ask me a question. And I mean, that's how you and I met, I think, right? So I mean, to me, that makes that you became relatable to an audience, or they felt comfortable enough introducing themselves to you. And I think that's a win.
Yeah, I love that story. Dr. Sharon, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's so important to put the audience at ease and say something that makes you human. And then they do relate to you. They do connect with you. So Chrissy just shared that beautiful story of her heels on the bar stool, and making fun of that on stage put the audience at ease. And so I think it's critical that we all do that. I started today's podcast with a story of having a panic attack, and that's what motivated me to start this body of work. I think that we all have to share our own experiences, because someone in the audience needs to hear that. And you're on that panel for a reason. Someone needs to hear your story, and it could really make an impact. I mean, I've had people say, boy, you saved my life today, like someone contemplating suicide. You just don't know what impact you could have by the power of your story.
Wow, that is so true, because when we come in and we open ourselves up to vulnerability and we share our own stories, and And we do it scared sometimes,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
And I know that I do it every single time. I am scared when I am in front of an audience. And most people tell me I would have never guessed. I'm like, I am dying inside of full-on anxiety. I go, but I'm really good. And maybe it's because I've had years of being in the field of having to kind of show that strong kind of presence in construction. But the same thing happens is I purposely put myself in scary situations until they no longer feel scary.
Mhm.
And public speaking is one of them. And in fact, it's within the top, how, maybe help me, Dr. Sharon, top 5
It's
most
within the
scariest.
top 3, and I think the last I checked, it was only next to death in terms of that you're most afraid of public speaking. In addition, I don't know if death is first or public speaking is first anymore, but it's right up there next to death. So
Wow.
That's
a
crazy.
lot of
So,
people are, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to do this. And especially if you care about being liked, because when you speak on stage, you're going to have some people really like you and relate to you, and you're going to have some people not like you. And I think that's where there's some fear. Like if you notice on social media, if you put a clip of a panel or anything out there, you're going to have comments that are positive, and you're going to have some naysayers also. And I think that some of us are afraid of those negative comments, so we don't even put ourselves out there.
yeah, let's
Absolutely.
dive into that a little bit more, because I think if we think about the fear, and that's the fear that's holding us all back. And so then for me, I always kind of think in the why, like the 5 whys. And even Mel talks about that and as soon as I heard it, I was like, I do that. That's interesting. So the 5 whys is really about asking the question, why? Why am I afraid? Well, I'm afraid because what if I say something stupid?
Mhm.
Why are you afraid of saying something stupid? Because, well, what if I didn't prepare enough? Well, why didn't you prepare enough? I wasn't confident on the subject. And wherever that is, and you just keep kind of digging down, and then eventually you get to your root cause of your why. And then you can kind of go back and say, okay, well, then you need to not speak on things you're not confident on, right?
Mhm.
You need to do the research in advance so you feel prepared. And that will calm your nerves, because now you're showing up and you can be yourself. But if you're worried about someone's opinion, then that's a different thing, right? So what's the worst thing that's going to happen when you show up in as perfect and as prepared as you can possibly be? You're still going to have haters, and you're still going to have comments.
Yes.
So
Or the
for me,
microphone's not going to work.
the
Right.
microphone's not going to work. Something's going to go wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, and whatever that is that goes wrong it is what it is. You just kind of have to roll with it. Whether it's getting married, preparing for a speech, having a dinner party, something's going to happen, right? And so what's the worst thing that's going to happen? What can I do about it? It's out of your control. It is what it is, and you just roll with it. But I think the opinion piece, what are people going to say to me? What do people think about me? And how do you get past that? Chrissy, I'd love to know, have you always been so confident to walk up on a stage and speak, or did you go through that as well, about opinions of others?
Yeah, I think that everybody goes through a little bit of imposter theory. And again, it comes with maturity and even sometimes I'll listen back to something and I'm like, dang, I really know my stuff. So it's just reminding yourself. And I think like I've come to I've a lot of lessons learned where I don't sweat the small stuff. I mean, nobody's going to remember me because I had a run in my pantyhose that I will refuse to wear anymore, or anything stupid like that, or like I have a stuff on my shoe and I'm standing on stage. If you're doing a good job of speaking, nobody's looking at your shoes, right? So you just learn. Every speaking event, I learned something new, right? Stand up tall. Don't put your hands in your pockets, which if I wear pants with pockets, I have a terrible habit of doing. Women love pockets. It's just a thing. But so you learn, and then you have to review yourself afterwards, right? If there's a photo or if there's that podcast I just did about sales leadership, I was listening to it and I was like, wow, you can really tell I'm from Chicago in this thing. I'm like, rah, rah, rah. I had to turn it off. I'm like, I can't listen to it anymore. And I said something to my husband about my voice. He goes, what's your voice? He goes, I hear it all day long. Anyway, but to me, like, I still like, I was like, oh, it's kind of screechy and annoying, but it's not about your voice. It's about the point you're making. So you just learn. You have to learn for everyone. I would do this different, or you bring your lessons learned to the prep calls. So listen, guys, like, this is what we're doing. I think one of the most important things, and I never do it, and I always remind myself that I should do it, is understand what the room setup is. Because if, like, I didn't know, like, last week I was standing behind a podium, right? Thank God I had a higher heel on because you wouldn't have seen me. Or if we can understand that ahead of time, it makes a big difference too. In your confidence, because if you could sit down and you're like, all right, I have my notes, whatever you need, it makes a big difference on how you're going to project to the audience.
I really want to get Dr. Sharon's opinion on this, but first I want to highlight the two things you said. Listen back to yourself, because I think that you can build your own confidence. You're like, wow, on one hand, you're like, oh, I really know my stuff. And on the other hand, you're like, I really don't like how I sound, but that's how you sound. And well, we all keep coming to listen to you. So it can't be that bad. I think you sound beautiful. The other thing is no one's going to remember the little things, right? And back to Dr. Sharon's point to how important the story is, they're going to remember the impact you had with them with your personal story. They're not going to remember that you had issues with your heels or you had a runner in your hose. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can take away from your story. Dr. Sharon, how do we deal with this though? Imposter syndrome.
Well, I'll tell you, when you hear those voices in your head, it might say you're not good enough to be on stage, or I'm not good enough. Those might be some of those voices, or I don't belong here. I don't have as much experience as everyone else. You need to stop it, and you need to say, shut up and speak up. That's what you need to do, because we need to hear more women's voices on stage. I think that it's now 2/3 of speakers at professional events are male, and I want to see more women up there. So we've got to kind of say, look, I need to feel the fear and do it anyway. That's basically what one way of overcoming imposter syndrome is. Another way is really knowing what your gift is. And I've got an exercise in my book called Your Authentic Brand. And there's 2 questions that can really get you in touch with your greatest gift to give. And it's, what's your greatest strength that just comes naturally to you? And what's your greatest challenge? And it comes from what you didn't receive from authority figures earlier in life, your greatest challenge. And what you most wanted to receive is what you most have to give. I always help my clients know their greatest gift. It's your greatest strength plus your greatest challenge. You connect with that before you go on stage, and you say to yourself, I'm here to give this to my audience. That's why I'm here. And it helps take us out of our head and out of ourselves and gets us into, what are we here to give? And it really is the fastest way I've found out of those negative thoughts, other than shut up and speak up.
Well, I've had a few guests who have tried to pass the baton. They're like, oh, no, I don't do the speaking. I that's not something I do. Usually someone else does that. I'm like, hold on. Why don't you want to do the speaking? They're like, well, I mean, I guess I could, but I just don't know as much as this other person. I've said, I think you know more than you think you do. Mm-hmm. And I said, it's pre-recorded, right? So let's talk about this. Let's talk about your fear in this situation. Let's prep in advance. We'll know the questions so that you can prepare and feel really confident coming in. And this person did wonderful. And when they were done, they were like, wow, that wasn't so bad. I go, well, that's how it feels like being on a panel. And I think I really would love to see you on panels, because I think you did a beautiful job in the podcast. And so I think that's a really great point you both have made, and both being very vulnerable and sharing your personal stories on here has just been wonderful. So thank you so much. I want to transition into an audacious question though, as we start to wrap up. It's a 2-part question. So I'll have Chrissy start, and then I'll have Dr. Sharon do the second piece of this. So if every stage and microphone around the world were suddenly handed to women for 1 year with no rules, no filters, and no approval of panel approvals, what conversations would finally rise to the surface, Chrissy?
Wow. I would say, how do we get listened to at an advanced age, in an advanced position in a corporation that's run by men? Which
Expand
is
on that.
going to
What does
be
that mean?
controversial, but I mean, it all goes back to, we need more women speakers. We need more women in our industry. We need more women. And again, I'm not getting on that soapbox, but I have found that as we age, as women in our industry, we've been in it a long time. We know what we know. I mean, and I think that we still don't get as much of the respect as we should for knowing what we know. And I think as we get older, it's very easy to say, oh, well, she's got a shorter runway. We want to bring somebody younger and cheaper in, or whatever it may be. And I have just found that this seems to be a common thing with a lot of women that I speak with. And I just spoke to a employment attorney about something else, and they're like, oh, every day it's something like that. So I would think about, how do we as women voice ourselves and support ourselves and advocate for ourselves to be at that executive table or be at that higher level and be heard.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you also say, and I'm going to build on this a little bit, is we have some women who also have arrived, but they're not stepping up and volunteering to speak and be present and be the front. They've like, I've done my work. It's been really hard and I'm tired.
I don't want to stir the pot. I don't want to mess anything up, or I don't want to start over, right? Because it's not easy starting over when you're older, right? And sometimes we could just get comfortable, and we want to be comfortable. But if in order to grow, you have to be uncomfortable. And I think we can only be our own advocates. You can have a mentor and you can have this, but if you don't stand up for yourself and what you know and your position and your own voice, nobody's going to advocate for you better than you.
Right.
Right. And you're not always going to like the answer,
100%.
but maybe that answer is an opportunity.
I think Amy Marks is a really good example of that. She does a great job of just standing up and advocating for women. Nancy Novak, no doubt, are two really strong examples in the industry of women.
Very good friend of mine.
Both great friends. We both know them really well. And really advocate and standing up and being present. And I just really want to see, like, and you, of course, are another one of those great presidents who have been in the industry for a really long time. Carrie Goetz, another great example of women who have just been in the industry, trailblazers who are standing up and bringing that. We need more of them. We know there's not many of us, but they're out there, and we owe it to the generation coming behind us to do that. So if only the women had the microphone, do we think more women would come forward? I want to transition into how would the world shift if women's voices were the loudest ones in the room, Dr. Sharon?
Well, I think that every time you get on stage, you are a role model to your audience. So if there's younger generations in the room watching you on stage, you're going to be a role model. And if those women, I know that I think it's 13% of engineers are women right now. That is so low. So I think what would shift is that we would have more women in traditionally male industries like engineering, like high tech. That's what we would see, and we'd be hearing more women's voices and perspectives. I mean, I'm in the leadership industry, and most successful leadership books are written by men right now. And I love men, but don't get me wrong. Like, I have a husband. I also have a great 20-year-old son. I have amazing male clients. I would like to hear more diverse voices on different subjects in the world, and not just one gender. So that's what I think would shift. We're going to see more representation of women in traditionally male industries, and also loudly be hearing their voices.
So how important is the diversity of voices? Now, I've had someone say to me, I don't really care if you're male or female. I just really want to bring the technical piece of this to the forefront. And I don't care if that's all male or all female. How important is the diverse voice?
I think that in general, it's important to hear different perspectives. I mean, otherwise you have groupthink. That's what I think. I love to hear different perspectives, and then you can put all those together and kind of come up with what's going to work for you. But if you're only hearing one side, then you're not going to, sometimes you can't even relate to one. If you're only hearing just one voice, you can't even relate to it if you're different. So I love to hear a variety of voices and then make informed decisions from there.
Yeah, I think that with the ability to bring a little bit more emotional intelligence to the conversation, really, that Rich really connects the technical piece back to the human piece. I think then therefore balances out the diversity in the conversation, because at the end of the day, the root of all of it is humans. And it's how we all really connect back to each other. I think at the end of the day is the most powerful piece of the diverse voice. Thank you both so much for being on the show and sharing with us some of your insights and your experiences and being vulnerable. I'm really hoping our ladies are listening to this and they step out of their comfort zone and reach out to Dr. Sharon if you need a speaking coach to help you get there. And then, of course, we'll have her links in the social links along with Chrissy's social links if you want to reach out to her as a mentor. I know she would
love to.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm volunteering you as a mentor to reach out. If you're just kicking off your career and you're just thinking, hey, I'd love to do this panel. When's the right time? Am I too young? I've only been in the industry for 3 years maybe, and you don't feel like you're ready yet. I think you're wrong. At least you can moderate, right? And learn, as Chrissy has said before, you learn a lot by just being a moderator of a panel and working with those experts in the field. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, BCS Switchgear, who keeps our mic hot, and to our Powered By sponsored Mod 42 for modular data centers. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
You really appreciated it.